Okay, hi. It's great to be here. I've been a CEO of Karmas for 2 years, and that's been my great fortune to be involved in this big data market and get a chance to talk to a lot of companies who are very much the early adopters and how this market's going to flesh out. So I'd like to give you our point of view about the market, what we're seeing, maybe take it a little bit to the business level about why I think Hadoop is going to be the infrastructure for the CMO. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, as he mentioned, a few things about my background that are salient to the conversation is that prior to Karmasphere, I was at Omniture. And so we were a big data web analytics company. We weren't on Hadoop, we were on a MySQL infrastructure. And we had a lot of challenges because all the data was sampled and everybody wanted to give us their mobile data and their RFID data and their sensor data, and we could not take that. Our infrastructure was breaking. And so I was looking around thinking, okay, what is going to be the next, where are people going to put all this data? Prior to that, I was at BEA, so I watched the whole application server market grow up. Prior to that, I was at Oracle, working with ISVs. My job was get 1,000 ISVs on top of the Oracle platform. So I bring that perspective to the market, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I'm here with Nanda, who is the director of our solutions engineering team. So she'll take it down a level and get into some of the ways that we see people are trying to solve analytics problems for big data. So thank you. Now I think I got this right. Okay, just a minute about Karmasphere. We're a horizontal analytics company. We're making a bet on Hadoop. We don't run on anything but the Hadoops. We have an environment and a platform where you can use HQL, SQL, Visual. It's for data analysts and casual people to work in teams to do analytics on top of Hadoop. So if that's something of interest to you, come and see us. I want to talk about three things. The $64 million question that everyone asked me today, what are we going to do with all the data? What are we going to do with Hadoop? Where's the use case? So we've seen a lot of, which happens in great new technology markets where IT, it's a bottom up, right? We've got Hadoops being implemented all over the enterprise. But then there comes a point when people say, what's the use case that we're going to put on this? And so I think that's where the market is today. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. So in this market, what are we seeing that people are doing to be successful? And some thoughts that we have about how you might jumpstart Hadoop, whether you're inside of a company or you're a startup. Some thoughts that we have based on our experience. You have all the data about how much data there is, but this is one of my favorite slides because it's like, well, here we are. This was in the fall. This is an IBM slide of 2012, and it's like, wow, if we think there's a lot of big data now, it's just incredible. So that slide scares people. I know it scares CMOs because they don't know what to do. C-level executives, CEOs are, my gosh, how are we going to manage this? So one of my favorite slides. Just a little historical. We have had a technology stack for the last 30 years that's driven an incredible amount of value in the market. Thousands and thousands of software companies, consulting companies who have built value on that stack, right? It's a relational database with SQL, with BI analytics, Cube, kind of OLAP, ROLAP, all of that, and then apps on top. That infrastructure was fantastic for squeezing out operational efficiency. It was the infrastructure of the CFO, finance. It was actually the infrastructure of HR, the COO, the CRO, the supply chain guys, the ERP guys, the sales ops guys. This technology stack was great for telling us what the heck happened in our company. How many things did we sell? How much inventory? What were our turns? How was just-in-time inventory? A fantastic infrastructure for that. But now the world is changing, as this whole conference is about, and there is a new stack. That's why it's so disruptive and so exciting. We are at the beginning of another great technology revolution, but this time it's not going to be about what happened in the company. It's what's going to happen. How can I drive an outcome that I want to happen? How can I predict it? So it's going to be more about the database of intent. We're going to start to know, because of the nature of the data and its unstructuredness, what do people want? And the great thing about this stack is it takes all the data, structured, unstructured, behavioral. We talked a lot about the conference, but it's so much more affordable than relational stack. Right? Everybody wants to get to something that's more affordable. The other thing that is different here is it's also being driven by open source. This was not. This was being driven by proprietary vendors like Oracle and everybody else who was in that game. But we think the dynamics of open source are a really, really important piece of what's happening there. So the question is, what can I do with all that data? What is it good for? So we think that that new stack is going to be the infrastructure for the CMO. A couple data points as to why. One, all the Gartner reports, the IDC reports, the Forrester reports telling us that the CMO is going to have more budget in 2016 than even the CIO and the IT department. So companies are looking at marketing to take charge and drive innovation with this technology. We don't think this technology is about saving money. We think this technology is about top line, about competitive advantage, and how do I optimize my relationship with my customer. That's why, number one, we think it's an infrastructure for the CMO. Two, IBM thinks that. So when Ginny, the new CEO, took over at IBM, the first conference that she had in New York was, CIO, bring your CMO to this conference and we're going to educate you about big data and what you can do with it. So I saw that as a real indicator that IBM is looking at the CMO as the potential inheritor of this technology and the business driver of it. So there's some challenges around that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but there's bunches of signs that this is happening. So if we look at this customer life cycle, we've really simplified it. People buy your products, they use your products, and you support them. And at every stage here, you can now use big data to optimize it. So we're trying to help companies by coming up with the use cases. So we've identified 9 of them. We're working more and more on this. But on the buy side, the use side, all kinds of things that you can do if you have all the data to drive innovation. One of the most interesting things is all this telemetry. You know, we're working with a lot of gaming companies. You know, they put out a game, and in a matter of 2 days, they have to know exactly what is being used in that game, what's not being used, how to turn it around, how to give engineering new feature requests, and how to make the cycle time really fast on the features. We're working with companies that deliver digital products, and they want to know what features are they using, is it staying up, is it failing, when is it going to fail, how do I interrupt the failure? I think telemetry is a really interesting part of the analytics world. But again, it's in support. How do I become more proactive? So there's a bunch of use cases, and Nanda's going to take you through one, and how do you use Hadoop and analytics to solve it, which is something that is so horizontal, every company needs to better segment their customers today. It doesn't matter if you're a bank, a retail store, even a healthcare provider. You have to have really much better segmentation about your customer than we've ever had before to make these engagements work. So we're going to show you how to do what we call micro-segmentation in Hadoop. So I think the point here is we think there's going to be a lot of great customer innovation that's coming out of Hadoop in the short term. So we don't really think it's about more BI. I mean, BI isn't going away. It's so part of what gets delivered in terms of information, and Hadoop systems are going to have to integrate, but we're just not sure that the world really needs a whole bunch of more BI. We think the world needs a lot more big data analytics. So where are we on the journey? This is a slide everybody maybe knows, Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, how technology markets are formed. Where are we in the formation of this market? You know, the tornado happens when you hit the green. I ask everybody that I meet, where do you think we are? Have we crossed the chasm? Are we in the early adopter? Everybody agrees we're in the early adopter. So now that we know we're all early adopters of this technology, and we're trying to get into the green space, because that's where all the money and the velocity is, how do we get there? So we're on a journey And my recommendation is, we all got to start to go faster. I think the worst thing that companies can do, and I'm starting to talk to a lot of CMOs and companies, telco companies, retail companies, they can't sit on the sidelines anymore and wait. They got to jump in. So how do we help them? Before I talk about that, I want to say we have to help ourselves first. So on an individual level, I think all of us have an opportunity right now to reinvent and jumpstart our careers. There is a whole new set of expertise, an opportunity forming in this market. So we have to get prepared. So we tell people, go get training, go get educated, go get certified, go to the Third Eye classes. They have fantastic classes to get people ready to take on the challenge. So we sort of have to put on our oxygen mask before we can help others. So I think this is critical, and lots of great companies are helping people to do this. Now let me get to my 3 success drivers. If you're inside a company today and you're responsible, maybe you brought Hadoop into the organization, you brought the cluster in, you put some data in, you're ready to go, and you're like, what's the next step? This is what we're seeing. You have to reach out to the LOB. It's going to be vital to do that. And we think the LOB to reach out to is the marketing organization. Now, as a former CMO, and I was the one, I created something called CMO.com. So I got to interview a lot of CMOs about digital marketing and big data. And they're afraid of it, but what they're doing now is putting in marketing ops teams, technology teams inside the marketing organization, so that they have the technology prowess to work with IT. I think this is going to be an important thing for the CIO, the CMO, the head of IT, people in marketing to come together. And the way we're seeing them do this is to go find a use case, and we're trying to help companies by saying, hey, here's 10. Go pick one. We think you'll get some value at it. There's lots of consultants in this room. We're trying to help companies to do that. Identify a budget. These projects that we've been seeing over the last 18 months tend to be small. They're not trying to solve intergalactic problems. Form a project team. We're seeing product managers, engineering teams, and the IT organization come together, define the problem, partner on a small POC, and educate each other. So that's how we're seeing some of the first use cases in the companies evolve. I already talked about that statistic and why we think it's going to be marketing. Second, we think you have to look at second generation. Now, this isn't an ad for Karmosphere, but maybe it is. I mean, this is our philosophy. We think the tools have to support both your data analysts who are pretty sophisticated and know SQL, but also your business analysts who are not. These teams have to work together. You don't want to have all these separate tool sets. How are we going to get people to work together? They got to work collaboratively. We have to be able to empower interactive visualization. And also, I think an important thing is to make sure that we are facilitating. There's a new workflow for Hadoop. It's different than relational, right? We had ETL before. Now it's different. We call that workflow ingest, analyze, publish. It's a little slightly different, and we automate that in the tool, but you have to look at the workflow, and I think Nanda will point out some of the differences. Also, we think like other applications that are coming into the market, you want adoption inside your company of these new tool sets. We think gamification and some of those kinds of features are going to be motivators for people to want to use products. So we got to look at second generation, third generation type of tool sets. What we also see coming is analytic hubs. We see analytics moving from a manufacturing type of approach to assembly. We are starting to see in the marketplace, we're a big believer in the Hive and HQL community. We're seeing a lot of new algorithms be delivered from the Hive community. We're seeing UDFs coming from companies like Zementis, who are taking SAS PMML models, creating Hive UDFs, and you can ingest them and take those models and start to score those models on Hadoop. So we're starting to see these hubs, You know, the other day eBay made an announcement about an internal analytics hub that they have. It's a repository for their UDFs and queries and visualizations because they want people to share this stuff. So we think hubs are going to be very important, both privately inside of companies, and maybe we'll see some public ones in the marketplace. So we believe in standards. We believe companies want to reuse things. They don't want to create everything from scratch. They want things to be standard. So there's a need for, gee, how can I manage all these analytic assets that I'm going to start creating? Where do I put them? How do I secure them? How do I share them? And the like. The other thing that we talk about is going native on Hadoop. So our application is not, you know, a BI tool that's been moved over to the Hadoop environment. We think there's a lot of richness to be gained by looking at the new products that are coming out that were designed specifically for Hadoop. There's a term that's being used now, it's being called full fidelity analytics. Cloudera is using that term, Hortonworks is using that term. Full fidelity means I have people working on the totality of the data set, not just sampled. Right? I'm also working on the data on Hadoop. I'm not moving it. I'm not duplicating it. I'm not recreating it. I want to work on the totality of the data on Hadoop. That creates for richness, and it also reduces complexity. So we just think that's something that people should start looking at, you know, when they're starting to evaluate analytics in the market. So now I'm going to, having said that, I'm going to introduce Nanda, and she's going to take you into a use case on Hadoop on the segmentation business challenge that I described.
Thank you, Gail. Hello, everyone. My name is Nanda Vijaydev. I'm a director of solutions engineering at Karmasphere. Gail's made a lot of points without, you know, going too much into details. I kind of want to show some aspects of the use cases in Hadoop. I work with a lot of prospects and customers, and it's typically the same kind of questions. Traditional BI had people who were doing SQL on their structured databases, and then there are statisticians. You know, they don't typically, they were not the same group. And now we all of a sudden have people, you're asked to do predictive type of analytics on traditional data, or you have a lot more richer data that the BI groups have to deal with. So going back to one of the slides that Gail talked about, you had the typical structured data. So what are the issues with this, right? You had, the analyst was here. The analyst is now working on a cube that's already pre-built, and the information is processed, aggregated, and it's at a level that they can run their queries or SAS models or whatever. Suddenly, they have this whole rich set of data, or they have more signals that they have to deal with. And how do they query on that? There is latency in this approach where this may take, I used to be in a group where we were building cubes, and if somebody asked for something new, it's like, out of luck, you probably have to wait 48 hours to 6 months, depending on, you know, your process of regenerating the cube. Some companies had a very long cycle going from requirements gathering all over again to building your cubes, or some companies were a little more agile, but it's still, there was a lot of latency to get to this point. So in the new world, this is, I think, back to Gail's point about full fidelity. Here, the data on Hadoop, we'll talk about some of the signals later of all the different kinds of data that you can involve in your analytics. And the person who is doing the analysis has full access to the data in its raw form, probably exposed in a way that you can easily understand the data. And then you run your analytics and you iterate. This is the cycle that was hard to do in the traditional BI, where you're looking at the data, you see some insight, okay, this is somewhat what I have or what I want, I need more information. So you kind of go back, grab more information, and then you do your analysis, and your applications are directly driven from the output or the work product of this iteration. So let's take a specific example, right? Gail talked a lot about CMOs and specifically, how do I segment my customers? What kind of business value am I looking for? So if I'm an analyst and somebody has called me into a meeting and say, okay, we have all these type of questions that we want to ask, and this is our business value, help us how do we go from here? I actually met somebody in the hallway, and they were like, I hear a lot of talks about the infrastructure on the platform, how do I, what databases, what security and all that, and there are models and predictive analytics. So she was saying, I'm not able to connect the two worlds. It's like, how do I go from this world to that world? What is bridging the gap? And if I am from BI, how do I understand your predictions and all those algorithms? And if I am from SaaS, how do I make use of all this richness of data that people talk about? So this is, I hope going through this, you can actually see the bridge between these two worlds and how this new signals can help you actually understand how to bridge the gap. Some of the typical questions are, how do I increase my traffic? How do I make my customers stay on the site? How do we convert from browsers to buyers? So it's really trying to understand how can you make your customers, while you have your attention, stick and serve them the right products at the right time so you can increase your ROI. So that is, the first thing is understanding what you have to do. And your second part is, what kind of insights do I need to actually accomplish that business need that somebody asked in my business meeting? So kind of taking it a level down, all those questions, now what am I actually looking for here? So I need some numbers. I need some specific aggregations or specific work products or specific insights that can help me drive that. So now how often do they visit? What did they buy? How much did they spend? A lot of this traditionally also we could have done. You could have done RFM models, the recency frequency monetization of retail world, but those were all based on transactions. So historically based on a transaction, you could have gotten that information, but now that you have new signals, there is a new set of information. And the most important thing being the relevance and the timing. There was this retail conference where we went to where, how many of you heard of Cyber Monday? It's like a lot of people. And then Cyber Tuesday, a few people did raise their hand, but there is no such thing as Cyber Tuesday as far as I know. But then it goes to, you miss that day of Cyber Monday, you're kind of gone. It is, are you able to provide the information at the right time while you have their attention? So this is, I think since morning, a lot of people have talked about the type of signals, but just to kind of capture, you have your logs, right? What do you get? And it's also the relevance of this data. What do you get from logs? You have your search terms, page views, user agent, geo, duration, and all this next set of signals that are above and beyond what I was able to do with my traditional data warehouse, which were based on orders and stuff. So now, how do I relate that to campaigns? How do I relate that to affiliates? Working with, in big companies like eBay, Apple, and all, they pay heavy emphasis to how does my affiliate or how does my channel actually, how do I get my attribution? Who do I attribute a particular, sale to or a particular click to? Was my impression clicked? Was my this whole attribution of channels is such a huge challenge, and the more signals which are relevant and appropriate you put together, the better model you can come up with. And then the social media signals, it's reviews on your own website, reviews on Twitter, Facebook, God knows where, everywhere people are just talking about your products. And how do you actually get all that information and get the right set of information or the right amount of information? And you have plenty of intelligence in-house. The products themselves, I've been in BI world for a very long time, and the attributes of the SKU themselves are just growing so big by the day. It was just about, every SKU had an area, IL suffix in your traditional, when you had a stockable unit, and now with the digital unit, it's more. And then you have categories, which is just not one. I have a data set that I can show you guys where categories go from 1, 2, now you have 13, 14, depending on when it was on your page, when it was displayed, how it was clicked in association with other things. Everything is just more and more complex. And this is your traditional information you had. So now if you have to do any analysis, especially for CM organizations, how do you actually take all this and tie them together? So that's one of the challenges that it's easier said than done. People say, okay, we understand all this, and then we understand the final model. Now show us some way of actually making sense out of this. Not to forget the profiles information, where you had your names, location, and gender. Now you have psychographics, demographics, reach, influence, interest, and all kinds of things that people want to put in. So typical steps, this is not different from what it was before. The difference is really in how you use it, not what you had. So you describe and prepare the data. Believe it or not, about 80%, I guess depending on how bad your data is to begin with, 70 to 80% of the time people spend their time just trying to describe, analyze, reduce, aggregate. It's like you might be a fantastic, cool, super data scientist or somebody who's just writing SQL. Majority of your time is still spent doing that thing. And now you're not just doing on your structured cubes. Now you just have to do it on the dirty or the vast data that comes from pretty much anywhere and everywhere. And the fundamental difference, like I said, the steps are kind of the same, but now you do initial analysis not just on the data that's prepped and staged for you, but you're doing it on the raw data. That just makes it so much more challenging. It probably goes to 90% compared to 80 before. Just keeping this in the context of Hadoop world itself, a number of things you can actually do on the data without having to go further here, further into modeling and all that. Because in the BI world, you do have people who write simple queries. They do their selects and aggregations and group bys and order bys. Even with that, you can actually get a lot of insight if you have the right set of tools. But then, if you have extra functionality that you need, right, once you get into predictive modeling, this itself is a big challenge for people. Number 4, where you identify the right set of features. You probably had 15, 20, 30 useful dimensions before. Now suddenly, with all the data thrown in, you may have 300, 400. Some people have 1,000 dimensions. It's like, what dimension is useful? How do I make sure that I actually see a correlation between this variable and the result that I'm interested in? What is the cross correlation between even the variables itself? So a lot of those kind of analysis has to be done initially, and then you get into, and then sampling. You have to sample the right amount of data, because no matter what tool you have, you cannot actually come up with a model. You cannot author a model on the size of data that's in Hadoop. So you would have to effectively come up with the right sampling of data. Then you create a model outside. I don't think you necessarily have to model in Hadoop. You can take it to R, SAS. We have seen there is another tool called K9, which is an open source modeling authoring tool. I use that tool to do your simple modeling. Any model you use, you can create the right equation or the right mathematical equation that you want that can predict, and then bring it and score it in Hadoop. So now you have the advantages of actually creating your model and also getting your predictions on the Hadoop-sized data. And finally, you can use your insight to improve the business value. So the rest of the time, I'm just going to show a set of, this is product data. It is not my columns and rows. And as I've highlighted the category path, it's not one category anymore. This is real data from one of the big box electronic stores. And now I actually have to run analytics on top of that. It's just not about, it has your weight and height and color and depth and everything, but just the categories. What SKUs, what are the related type of products? Because relationships are not just, I have defined this as one-to-one, but relationships vary depending on where it was shown and who else bought what with it. And you still have to get some kind of a standardization based on that information. And I think there was a question in the morning about, my customer really doesn't have the bigness of the big data. Is that really a problem? It isn't to begin with, but you'd be surprised at how fast this grows. There is a site called competitive.com. If it's just, some of you have seen it. If you go there and just give any vendor's name, this is Walmart's traffic per day. There's 80 million clicks at the peak. And even smaller companies like Shopzilla, you can see, and all the competitors' traffic, you can see a chart of that. It just shows you that even smaller companies, mom and pop shops, the more information or the accurate products you serve, this does seem to go into a very big domain. And again, big data is not just about the volume, and it's also about the variety of data. Why do I care? If there is so much data, why do I care? So the reason you care, there's a lot of information on this long tail where majority of the people who click a lot or who visit a lot are very few. And your competitive advantage or the real insight that can actually differentiate your business from other businesses happens in the tail. The more you explore, the more combinations you get in the tail and get it right, that's where the money is. So a lot of people talk about how the money is in the tail, so you have to invest in analyzing the tail. So this is I'm just using Karmosphere, but just to show the kind of, and this is again not a business slide, but just to put things in perspective. Here I have all the clicks information, and then impressions, and then products, product reviews, ratings, SKUs. Everything is in its raw form exposed using Karmosphere as a table and a bunch of columns. And now you're actually trying to put them together, even for a weekly fact table or a monthly table, or you're kind of trying to put them all together using Hive SQL. Just a simple SQL statement can now actually go across all those different data sets and get you the right set of aggregations or the right features that you're interested in for your further analysis. And now, I think I briefly touched on the user-defined functions that are already available in Hadoop for those who are new to Hadoop or Hive. There are a number of functions. Some of these we may have written, it's probably come into the community later, but you can do ranking, you can do group bys and order bys from your traditional world, but then also the richness of Hadoop is understanding that the data in Hadoop now is text, so you have to do text analytics. There is some kind of statistical analysis that you have to do right from here. So there are n-grams, context-sensitive n-grams, and windowing functions. There is a lot of that too that's coming out of the box. And for any need that cannot be satisfied with just product out of the box, this is a tool I was talking about. I use K9 and sometimes R. They have R plugins, Wake Up plugins. So you just, you do your decision trees and you do your clustering, whatever you want. But the idea is that you take your original source of data is still Hadoop. With the data in Hadoop, you write the appropriate level of, peg scripts or Hive scripts or whatever you're comfortable with, get it to a point where you can sample the data and take it to any of your tools where you can model. And we work with a company called Zementis, where all these algorithms, you could have written your model in any languages that can actually export into PMML. PMML is a standard predictive modeling markup language. It is like XML, but it tells you what are the steps and what is the mathematical function that is needed for scoring this model in Hadoop. And Karmosphere helps you manage all these models as user-defined functions. And when you bring that model into Karmosphere, you can score and you can get the output of your naive-based classifier or your classification or your regression, any of those models you have built in, and you can score it in Hadoop. So in the interest of time, I think we'll just, the perfect timing, I kind of realized that. Okay.
Hi, Chris Rigatuso from Skyfollow Consulting Group. What you have shown it looks to be tools, like client-side tools or maybe web-based tools. Do you guys also have in the plans to deploy API or platform as a service?
Platform as a service, I'll leave my CEO to talk about it. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next few weeks, okay.
From an
Great.
API
Good
perspective, anything that's web-based in our product is using the API in the backend, so that is exposed as a REST API.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nice job. Good topic.
Oh, thank you.